Phil, welcome to the program. You know, when I asked you to do this conversation, have this conversation with me, probably about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I don't remember exactly when it was.
Yeah.
You said yes, and I was really grateful for that. But now it's 6 weeks later, and we're finally getting around to getting it on the books. And you've written so much great content since then that I'm not sure that what exactly we're going to talk about. So buckle up, and
Well, the news cycle happens quickly, and so I'm constantly responding to things out there. So, yeah, things change for sure.
yeah, and by the way, I'll have a link to all of our listeners and viewers in the show notes that will, take you to some of the content that we're going to be talking about today. And Phil, before we get started, too, I wanted to say, we talked about this a little bit off before we started recording, but you've had knee surgery and you've been
Yes. Yeah,
overseas,
part of
right?
the yeah, for the listeners, part of the reason we bumped this off so much is I had my left knee replaced about 5 weeks ago. And so I had to get out of the drug stupor for a while from all the painkillers and wanted to get a clear head before I talk to you because you can nail me and I have to be very careful of that. So and here we are. But it's okay. If I cry out in pain during the interview, you'll know why.
Yeah, exactly. The so now that you've got a new knee, I guess they don't. It's not like I just got the tires replaced on my car and they gave me a 50,000 mile guarantee. I don't guess they do that for knees, do they?
No, no, but you know what's funny? I went to Toronto last week already, and I went going and coming, went through the airport X-ray machine, and it didn't set it off. I was amazed. I thought my new metal knee would set it off, but apparently it didn't. So, who knows what's going on?
Yeah, I've got some friends that have some metal parts in them, and they say that sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. One person I remember I saw on a social media post saying that they went 10 years and they never set off the machine, then
Wow.
suddenly they did. So I don't know. These are the ways of TSA are too wondrous for me,
That's true.
as the Bible says. Well,
That's
Phil,
true.
let's jump into some of the content that I wanted to talk about today. When we first started corresponding about having this conversation, it was when the CEO of Astronomer,
Yeah.
the tech company, was caught on a video at a Coldplay concert with a woman who was not his wife, and it was a huge uproar. I think so much has happened in the news since then that a lot of folks are, it's old. It feels like old news, and I get that,
Yes.
and just want to acknowledge that straight up. But what you wrote, I don't think is old news. You wrote an article about how churches and ministries could learn from the Astronomer PR crisis, and you nailed a few lessons, and I just thought that they were really helpful, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind recounting some of those lessons that you wrote about in your article. And one of them, and I'll just go ahead and tee you up here, is that
Yeah.
in an instant message social media world, organizations today must respond faster to a crisis because it can elevate onto a global stage within minutes, literally, and people want answers. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. People forget that we live in an instant message, text messaging world where word travels fast. And, my first word to leaders, particularly pastors and ministry leaders, is you can't hide anymore. I actually had a pastor years ago tell me, Phil, it would probably be best if you didn't tell the congregation about my yacht. And I said, well, man, you're an idiot. Number one, they can Google the title of the yacht and, in your name. And if they have Google Earth, they can download a satellite photo of the boat sitting at the dock. So in the old days, you could get away with things, you could hide things. But I tell you, as Christian leaders, we need to be more transparent than ever. And I was at a pastor's conference recently and I said, if you leave church one Sunday and you pull out of the parking lot and somebody T-bones you out in the street, you're going to be upset. You're going to get mad. You're going to get out of the car. You'll probably want to yell at that guy. But I can guarantee you nowadays, somebody's standing on the curb with their phone videotaping the event, and it will be online in a matter of seconds. So it's just interesting how things have changed from when my dad was a pastor in Charlotte, where you are,
Yeah.
to today. Things have dramatically changed, and we really gotta respect that and understand how that works.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and we see it every day. I mean, since the Astronomer CEO debacle,
Yeah.
I mean, I think about. I'm a baseball fan, so there was. I think they started calling her Philadelphia Karen, or Philly Karen, about
Yes.
this woman
Yes.
that basically intimidated a father and son into giving a baseball that she thought that she should have. And I mean, that was the shot heard around the world. I mean, it seems like every other day or so, there will be some video of somebody,
Yeah.
and not having a good day. I mean, and I'm not trying to excuse these people's behavior by any means, but
Yeah.
let's face it, we all have bad days. And I think
Yeah.
what you're telling us is that the worst moments of our life that might just be a bad memory for us, something that we grimace when we think about, is now
Yeah.
national news.
Well, and also remember, your emails and your text messages never go away. Even if you delete them, we think they're going away, but they don't. Because I can tell you in a court case, people will dredge up emails that you thought you had deleted years ago. And the same way with text messages, the phone company will turn them over in a deposition. So it's something to remember that just because you're trying to hide your trail doesn't mean that's going to go away. They still come up. So we just have to be really sensitive and careful about how we live our lives these days, particularly as Christian leaders.
Yeah. Now, Phil, I don't want to spend too much time on this because, like I said at the beginning, it's now kind of dated, I guess you
Yeah.
could say, in terms of the news hook. But there was something. So this thing happened with the Astronomer CEO. Astronomer itself did respond fairly quickly, but they responded with a Gwyneth Paltrow video that
Yeah.
had. And I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow is Chris Martin of Coldplay's ex-wife, so there
Yeah.
was an element of sort of edginess and humor and irony to the situation. But and it seemed, I think, in the moment to be relatively effective. But you
Yeah.
said be really, really careful. I mean, if you don't have an
Yeah.
actress like Gwyneth Paltrow, and you can really get that wrong, right?
Yeah, well, it was a secular company. In a church or ministry environment, a morality issue is a lot more serious, a lot more serious. If you're cheating on your wife or your husband, if, something like that's going on, it's a lot. If there's an abusive situation, especially, which this didn't appear to be. Well, it kind of was because it was an employee. And we
Yeah.
always think, and this is something to think about, that when the power dynamic is off, whether it's a professor and a student, a pastor and a secretary or assistant, a staff member and a member of the congregation, whenever if that person is depending on you for a salary or a grade, or they hold you in high spiritual regard, having a sexual relationship with that person is considered abusive. And so we need to think about that as leaders these days. It's an abusive situation. But in a secular company, they're going to look at it in a different way. So they could afford to, be lighthearted, take a humorous approach, which I think worked for them very, very well. It was a stupid thing the CEO did. Everybody acknowledge it. And by the way, I think one of the great things the company did was to be honest. They didn't hide it. They didn't try to hide it. They didn't try to cover it up. And that's another word for churches. Whenever something happens, when we're in a crisis, you can't hide it. You can't cover it up. It will always come back to bite you in some way. So, very
Right.
often we think for good reasons, we want to protect the family, or we want to protect the church or the ministry or whatever. Trust me, you don't have to go into gory details, but you need to be honest about what happened, because in a church situation, especially, trust is everything. And if people feel like you're not telling the truth or telling the whole truth, they're going to start guessing what went wrong, and that will not go well. And once you start losing their trust, you've lost everything.
Yeah, well, that's a good word, Phil, and I'm just going to leave it at that for now, and tell everybody once again that I will link to that article that Phil Cooke wrote called "What Churches and Ministries Can Learn from the Astronomer PR Crisis" in the show notes for today's program. And Phil, I would like to pivot off of that
Yep.
into another article that you wrote, because again, since we sort of initiated conversations about having this conversation,
Yeah.
the Cracker Barrel debacle also
Yes.
hit, and
Yes.
you wrote an article about the Cracker Barrel debacle, and you said, and it was titled similar to the Astronomer CEO, what churches and ministries can learn from the Cracker Barrel rebrand fiasco. So
Yeah.
share with me what you were thinking about that when you wrote that
Well,
article.
first of all, it's important for everybody to know that rebranding is normal. You know, the Bible says God's word never changes, but believe me, everything else does. People change, trends change, styles change, things change. And so there's times we need to update the way we approach the culture. Maybe Third Presbyterian Church, that name had resonance 100 years ago, but it doesn't really mean a lot to a lot of people today. So we've worked with a lot of churches that want to update their name, update the look. You know, maybe it's time to just refresh the building. Those kind of things are good. They're a positive thing because we want to continue to be attractive to people. We want to get them in the door, and so that's really important. But you have to be very, very careful of how you do it. In the case of Cracker Barrel, talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I've been a critic of Cracker Barrel in the last few years. I've always loved it. I'm a big breakfast guy. But in the last few years, I travel a lot. I've eaten it a lot around the country, and I've noticed the quality is going down, service is going down. But that didn't mean I hated the restaurant or I didn't like the little store they have out there. Or I didn't like the atmosphere. And they decided to fix those, small things, relatively small things like that. They decided to just change everything. And that's why people went in an uproar. So I always tell churches and ministry organizations, figure out what the problem is and let's go after the problem. You don't necessarily need to change everything just to fix this problem. So understand what the problem is, target that, and chances are you can solve the problem in a much bigger, much more effective way.
Well, Phil, talk to me a little bit about why this suddenly became a culture war phenomenon. Because
Yeah.
I get what you're saying as a practical matter. You want to bring your old customers along,
Yeah.
by not changing so much, but you want to fix the problems that you have so that so that you can attract new people to your organization, but also it may be that the old brand, like you said, is no longer working. It's not an accurate representation of who you are today. So I get that on a sort of a purely
Right.
marketing and business level and communications level. But there was an extra dimension to the Cracker Barrel rebrand that I thought, candidly, was a little bit ridiculous. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm just a little blind here. I mean, it really did become a culture war phenomenon, and the president of the United States got involved, and people said that it was that the rebrand was a sign of wokeness
Yes.
and caving to progressive ideology. And where did that come from, do you think?
Well, it's funny. I read a study. First of all, I understand people hate change. I read a study years ago that indicated that the vast majority of open heart surgery patients within 2 years go back to their old lifestyle, smoking, eating cheeseburgers, drinking, whatever got them there in the first place, which means people would rather risk death than change their lifestyle. So people hate change. So you have to be really sensitive and make it worth their while. What I noticed about the Cracker Barrel rebrand was, and a lot of people have told me that when they saw interviews with the CEO, she's younger, she's very hip looking. She doesn't look like their customers at all. I mean, she does not look like a Cracker Barrel person. And so for her to go on national television and talk about this company needs a whole new refresh. It needs to rethink. We need to rethink this from the ground floor up. People just didn't buy into that very well. And so very often you have to think of, the kind of who are you serving? So many, and this is what churches are guilty of very often. We talk amongst ourselves. We talk amongst the leadership team. I saw her do an interview once, and they asked her, "Are people buying into this?" She said, "Oh yeah, I've talked to our store manager. I've talked to our executive team." She never once mentioned I've talked to our customers. So always think about the people you're serving because they need to have a voice in the process. And she waited too late to do that, apparently. And now she's backtracking. It's funny. I saw a social media post by Cracker Barrel saying, we're going back to the old logo. We're going back to the old style of the restaurants. We listen to you. Well, they should have listened before they spent tens of millions of dollars to change all that stuff. So I think in churches, very often a pastor will have a vision, but if he doesn't make an effort to get the support of the congregation, the elders, the board, whatever, that's going to fail. And so we need to be really sensitive and remember who we're serving.
Yeah. Phil, why do you think that happens? I mean, we see this from time. I mean, organizations, companies rebrand, like you said, all the time, and there are good reasons for doing it. And most of the time, it goes without incident. I mean,
Yeah.
there might be some glitches. I mean, when I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers for years early in my career, and I was on the marketing team. We had to rebrand because
Yeah.
Price Waterhouse was a merger of Coopers and Lybrand and Price Waterhouse, and I was kind of a part of those conversations, and they're hard. So I mean, I know firsthand these conversations can be hard, and there are people that won't like it, but I mean, they mostly go okay.
Yeah.
But why do you think it is that from time to time, New Coke or Cracker Barrel, or and there are probably a few others, occasionally they percolate up and they become cultural moments. And why do you think that is? Do we just put too much stock in that kind of stuff these days, or do these brands really symbolize something deeper in our minds and hearts and culture that we don't appreciate? What do you think's going on?
I think in many ways it's all of the above. Two of the things that I've noticed most importantly is number one, they're not communicated well. I think in this case, the change just came out of the blue. Nobody knew about it. Nobody talked about it. We don't communicate well. And I'll tell you, in many of the church crisis situations that have made headlines in the last year or two, no matter how bad the problem was to begin with, in most cases, it was made far worse because it was communicated so poorly. We need to think. Somebody told me one time, churches have a lawyer on retainer in case they have, legal issues come up. Maybe they need to have a communication expert on retainer to help them communicate through difficult times. When a crisis is happening, how you communicate it matters. The second thing I would say is social media has changed everything. Now we jokingly say people have a voice who shouldn't have a voice these days. Everybody feels like they have to share their opinion on everything that happens. And so it's created this fractured, polarized world that regardless of politics, regardless of viewpoint, people just want to spew. And so very often that can, we live in a world where a housewife in Des Moines can topple a major corporation just through the
Right.
power of social media. So we do need to take that into consideration. I remember talking to a social media expert about Gillette a number of years ago. They introduced a Gillette razor, and they did an advertising campaign that was apparently not very tasteful. The audience hated it. And she said, you know what? I had to bring in 20 social media people on the phone for about 3 solid weeks. We were on the phone 24/7, responding to social media posts, responding to calls. She said it was just a nightmare. And that's representative of the world we live in today.
Yeah, Phil, I've by the way have adopted a personal policy that I'm gonna presumptuously share with you in the world right now, and that is that when we post, at MinistryWatch,
Yeah.
we write a lot of content and we post all that content on social media, and and I personally post a fair amount. So I look at my comments, and occasionally I'll find one that's either critical or um, off base, I think,
Yep.
unreasonable. And I've made it a practice of, before I respond, I go to that person's profile and I take a look.
Yes.
Sometimes it's somebody with 3 followers, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, do I really want to magnify that person's
Yeah.
platform?
Right.
I mean, I think we should take a deep breath and just say, just because somebody said something on the internet, that does not mean you have to respond. You can just move on, right?
Yeah, and I would also encourage people listening to curate their social media following, or follow the people they follow. Let me put it that way. When you think about it, people check their social media all day long. And those are people that speak into your life on a continuous, repetitive level. And so who are you having speak into your life? Are you following people that inspire you and motivate you and lift you up? Are you following people that are constantly criticizing and saying ugly things and weighing in on things they know nothing about? That has a huge. I'm constantly going back into my feeds on X and Instagram and just seeing who do I follow. Maybe I need to drop a few people here and add these people, because it can make a real difference when you think in terms of these are the people speaking into your life nearly every day.
Yeah, that's a really good word, and I don't do that nearly as much as I should. Phil, I want to pivot once again in our
Sure.
conversation and talk to you about an article that you wrote. Not, in fact, this one is pretty recent. I think it was just a couple of days ago. How should I respond to a friend who is suddenly famous? And when I saw
Yeah.
that article, I was like, "Oh, please, this is a first world problem, right?" I mean,
Yeah.
Phil, why are you devoting energy and time to that? But then I started thinking about it a little bit, and number one, Andy Warhol in some ways is right. We're all going to be famous for 15 minutes, and it's going, this celebrity fame culture that we live in, whether we like it or not, probably is going to affect all of us. And one of the things that I've noticed, because I've got, like you, some friends who are, at least Christian famous.
Right.
And one of the things that I notice about their lives and about my relationship with them is that they still need friends and they still need people speaking into their lives. and
Mhm.
and I think it's important for civilians like me who are not famous to understand how that we can really play a role in other
Yeah.
people's lives, who are famous, by behaving in appropriate ways, and you help us do this. So can you say more
Sure.
about that idea?
Well, I've had a number of people in my life that we were friends, really close friends. We were in the trenches for years, and suddenly the spark happened, whether it was a film they got off the ground, or a project they got off the ground, or a book became a bestseller, and their career just took off like a rocket. And suddenly they don't have time for you anymore, or it's very difficult for them to make time, and you feel a little bit left out. And it's easy to feel hurt and maybe a little upset. And I have seen friends who had other friends who were famous, and they got real bitter about it, and they just became real critical of this person that was their friend. And so I thought, you know what? We live in a world today where, like you say, people can become, famous pretty easily. And so we need to have a way of dealing with it. And so I just wrote my post about, I listed some things like, number one, I'm thrilled for their success. We're all in this together. We're helping each other. I am thrilled for their success. So number one, I want to be their biggest cheerleader. And I've noticed that a lot of them, for instance, I have a friend who's a major Hollywood studio executive, and we've been buddies for a long time, and he got this huge promotion and step up to this huge high level at this Hollywood studio. And I asked him to be on my podcast recently, and he said, I would love to, but the studio is restricting the number of media appearances I can do in my first year of being in this role. And so I realized, wait a second, they're not being a jerk. Sometimes they have restrictions on their schedule and their time and what they're allowed to do. So we have to think about that. I also keep up the relationship. I don't bug them, but every once in a while, when I see them doing something great or have some success, I'll reach out to them and just encourage them and tell them I'm thrilled for them, just to keep that relationship going. So I think that there's a way we can nurture those kind of relationships and inspire them to even do greater things. And very often, and I've had many cases where they reached down and pulled me up, gave me a project that I could do that would help our company, or brought, introduced me to people who could help in my career. So, rather than get bitter and upset, I think the more we can do to keep that relationship going, and sometimes it needs to be us that keeps it going because they're caught up, they're doing stuff, they're traveling around the world and doing things. So don't expect them to do it, but you make the effort to be intentional and reach out. And I think it can make a really big difference. Now, I will say something funny. I did post on my list, when you do need a favor, make it significant. I mean, these guys, if this guy is just the head of a studio, or he's the president of a company, or the pastor of a huge church, and you want to reach out, just don't ask him for lunch. Ask him for something significant that he can help you with, because they're now in a position where they're going to have more influence. So it's not just about selfishness or anything like that. It's about helping each other, and we're all moving up the ladder, hopefully together.
Yeah. Well, one of the principles that I've adopted in my life, whenever, because whenever I have friends who our famous celebrities have a lot of restrictions on their time, a lot of demands on their time. I've just decided that I want to be a blessing and not a burden in their lives.
Yeah.
That's kind of a principle that I've adopted, that I'm not going to ask them. I mean, and I appreciate your advice, Phil, about, if you ask them for something, ask them for something big. And I guess maybe if I had an opportunity to do that, I might. But my personal philosophy is I don't ask them for anything. If I can offer something, I want to offer something, whether it's a word of encouragement or whatever. But I tried to not ask them for anything and only offer things. And that, for me at least, that's been the posture that I've tried to take in relationships generally. But
Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
want to agree with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking somebody for something. I think that is a sign of friendship when you can ask somebody for help at my one of my celebrity friends used to who I'm not going to name right now, but if I named him, I think a lot of our listeners would know who he is. He said, I want 2 a.m. friends in my life. I want somebody that if I'm on the road and the refrigerator goes out, or I have a plumbing crisis, I want somebody that I can call at 2 a.m.
That's
and
good.
they would not only take the call, but they'd be honored to take the call. That's just something that they can offer to the friendship. And so I'm not opposed to asking people for things. In fact, I think we should have friends in our life that we can ask, but I just want that to be very, very rare for me.
Well, it's funny. I've also found that in along that line, they want to help you. They want you to ask for something big. Very often they want to use their influence in a good way, in a positive way. And if you're old friends and have been around for a long time and they're close, who better than helping you? So it's not a selfish thing so much as you're giving them an opportunity to be a blessing to you, and they actually very often feel like, hey, I've achieved this level of success to be a blessing to people, like you
Yeah,
said
I
earlier.
think that's right.
So that's good.
Well, and I want to, especially, I mean, people that listen to Ministry Watch and read Ministry Watch, they probably already know this, but I want to say this just for the record. I'm not a big fan of celebrity. I think that human beings are not wired to be celebrities, and I
Yeah.
think that so I'm not, at least from my point of view, Phil, and I'm not going to speak for you. I'm not saying that celebrityhood is a good thing, but I am saying that the reality of our current cultural moment is that
Yeah.
celebrityhood happens. And I think that as Christians, it's we've got to know how to behave in this cultural moment. Other generations had other problems that they had to deal with that were
Yep.
probably they didn't ask for. This is a
Yep.
problem that I think many Christians don't ask for, but does happen. And for me, at the end of the day, it's really all about friendship. I think that Jesus said even to his disciples, up until now I've called you my servants, now I call you my friend. And I think that if we can just ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a good friend to someone?
That's good.
How can I love them? In that might be different. I mean, I love
Yeah.
you, Phil, differently than the way I love my children, differently than the way I
Sure.
love my wife, right? So I do think it really comes down to how can I love them? How can I bless them? How can I be a friend? And I think if we keep that first and foremost, that'd be a big help.
That's good. Yeah, I agree. I don't like celebrities myself, but it's a world we live in and we have to deal with it. So
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Okay, Phil, one final pivot. I got
Okay.
to ask you, and you didn't really write much about this, at least that I saw, but you posted on social media about this, and it struck a nerve with me because it's something that I've been talking about for a while. And your social media post was sort of along these lines. You're a film guy.
Yep.
You're a TV and movies and films
Hmm.
and visual guy. So you're delighted when Liberty University and Grand Canyon University and Full Sail and maybe others
Sure.
have robust video programs. But you advocated in your social, and I am too, by the way, but you advocated in your social media tweet or post, I can't remember now whether it was Facebook or Twitter or something else, that Christians should really be investing more in journalism schools, to
Yeah.
which this journalist says amen and amen. Can you say more about that?
Sure. Well, you're right. I graduated from Oral Roberts University with a film degree, and I've taught at Biola and Liberty and a bunch of places. And filmmaking is sexy. It sounds, young people are fascinated by it. And some Christian colleges, the filmmaking degree or the communications department is the biggest department on campus. But I do think in this cultural moment we live in, we are at I was just scanning through social media yesterday or day before yesterday and watching the network news and just thinking, wow, it's gotten so off base. It's gotten so left wing. Everybody that's conservative these days is considered right wing on legacy media out there. And of course, the left is progressive. And it's just interesting to me that we don't have a Christian speaking into this at a very high level. Now, I know there are some Christians and network news organizations. I have friends who are, but I just think we need more. We need more boots on the ground at the street level doing reporting who have a Christian worldview. And so I think if there's any way Christian colleges and universities could make an impact at this cultural moment we live in right now, is to start building up your journalism programs and get those kids out there. With the demise of newspapers, kids kind of left journalism and universities really didn't pursue them. But now journalism is coming back online and in so many other ways that but we just don't have anybody out there or many people out there with a Christian worldview who's capable of doing it. So, and don't get them jobs in Christian magazines or Christian websites. Let's get them jobs at NBC and CBS and ABC and CNN and Fox, every place. So I just think right now, that's probably the greatest way Christian colleges could impact the culture right now.
Well, Phil, I could not agree with you more. I mean, first of all, just to reiterate some of the things that you said and maybe add to it a little bit, very few Christian colleges have an undergraduate journalism program where you can actually get a bachelor's degree in an accredited journalism school. I know, for example, I went to the University of Georgia, an accredited journalism school. A lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends had to go to secular schools if they wanted to study journalism in a serious way. And not only that, if they want to teach journalism they have to have a grad degree. And I don't know of a single Christian college in the country, except I think maybe Regent has a graduate degree in communications, though I'm not sure it's a full-fledged accredited journalism school. So if I want to teach journalism at the college level and I'm a Christian, I have to go to a secular school. There's just absolutely no way around it. And I think that's a real problem. If I had the ear of a billion Christian billionaire right now, and he asked me, where could I invest 10 million or 20 or 30 million dollars that would have a long lasting impact for the culture? I would say, put that money into a journalism school at a top Christian college. And I think that would make a huge difference. So you really struck a nerve with me with that post, Phil. I know you didn't say much in that post, but I just wanted to.
Well, it's really a sensitive point to me because, like I say, I got my film and television degree at ORU as a undergrad. Then I got my a master's in journalism at the University of Oklahoma. So I wrestle with the two all the time, and I never went into journalism as a career, but I wanted to learn to write. At that program, University of Oklahoma had a fantastic writing program in their journalism school. And that helped a lot. But I just think that if we had more of those folks out there, it would really be amazing.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm grateful that you posted what you did and gave me an opportunity to get on my hobby horse and rant a little bit as well. Well, Phil, we're gonna have to bring this to a close. I could visit about these issues all the day long with you. I really find your work nourishing and helpful.
You're very kind.
Very practical, without dumbing things down. I mean, and I think that's really a virtue of your work. And we'll link to it in the show notes for today's program, some of the articles that we talked about, and just a link to Phil's website. So I think you can sign up for your emails if you go to your website. Is that correct,
Yeah,
Phil?
yeah, they can email me if they want to. That'd be
yeah. Very good. So, all right. Well, Phil Cooke, blessings. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.